Basically, this is the first time I'm meeting all of you. I heartily welcome for this third edition. I was told that this is the third edition of our brainstorming session on defense budget. And we all know how important and how significant the defense of a country is. Unless and until we have our own defense mechanism, our sovereignty is at a premium. If you see the Germany and Japan, after the World War, America is providing the defense kind of protection. But they have become the puppets of a country like USA, whereas we, after our independence, we worked very diligently to have our own defense, to have that sovereignty in a meaningful way. Now, the defense comes with a cost. That is, we call it as a defense budget. Every year, there is a significant amount of budget is allotted to our defense budget. And it has been going up and up due to the requirements of regional as well as the geopolitical incidents of the world. So therefore, it is our duty to first understand what constitutes the entire defense budget, how fruitfully and productively we can use that, so that our defense becomes very, very secure as well as future-looking. So in that case, we have been on TVs, in media, in social media, there has been a huge discussion on that. How to balance between revenue and capital budget. Capital budget is required because you need to have a huge inventory of weapons, ammunition, fighter jets, submarines, naval requirements, all those things. But at the same time, we maintain a huge manpower in comparison to others. So revenue is also a must. So based on this background, so these brainstorming sessions are very, very useful. They should work as inputs in future also. So I have suggested to my joint director, why don't you create some paper after this meetings, after this brainstorming sessions. So it may be a small step, but let us assume that in future it may snowball into a workable, beautiful, productive research paper. So this is my suggestion for all of us to see the outcome of this brainstorming session, because it is going on for the last 3 years continuously. It means it has got its own sustainability. So let us bring something out of this sustainability which is a workable outcome. That is my humble suggestion to the entire distinguished dignitaries. Thank you. Best wishes.
We come to the main program now. Now we'll have all the panelists giving their views for about 15 to 20 minutes each. And at the end of this, we'll have a question answer session in which all of us can interact and get your doubts clarified or give your comments or suggestions. So the first speaker we have is Jan Gadkari. Jan Gadkari has commanded an artillery regiment during the Kargil operations, and an artillery brigade in the counter-terrorism role in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And he has headed the prestigious College of Defence Management. And he was also the Deputy Commandant at the Army War College. He is a prolific writer and he has written a very good book which you all must read. It's titled Oscar Tango, On Target. It's a fiction and worth reading. And he has also done a research project for Center for Advanced Strategic Studies and published a book called Growing Sino-Nepal Relations and Policy Implications for India. And his last assignment was a very prestigious assignment, Director of Pune International Center. So over to Jan Gadkari.
Am I audible on this? Is it clear?
Yeah, it's clear.
To my memory, it is the fourth. Somewhere, maybe we had a mixed session.
I stand corrected.
No. I'm also patchy on that. 4 defense talks, and now I'm a veteran. In the sense that I realize no matter what you speak, it doesn't matter. So I wrote a blog very recently. I have a blog. I wrote something on my blog on defense budget. And my introduction, I question I wonder how many people actually look at budget. So I did some kind of a calculation and I said maybe 1%. And that 1% comes to 1.4 crores. And when I was doing my own calculation based on how many people watched the T20 final, I realized it is impossible. It would be half of that, so 70 lakhs. But the question asked is, if that is the state of union budget, what is the state of the defense budget? Which for quite some time, the defense minister does not even utter a single word on defense budget. Fortunately, things changed this year. Thanks to Op Sindoor, suddenly the defense budget came into some kind of recognition and there was a huge boost to defense budget, huge boost to capital budget, which is modernization, and you found all the newspapers the next day morning giving Hindu headlines, Indian Express headlines. They didn't know anything about what, but they gave headlines. So that was the change this year, and it was all thanks to Op Sindoor. So second point is last year, and I had the slides for last year. So when General Mahajan told me my first thing as a good military officer, go back to your PCK, I saw the complete thing on last year's. So let me modify it. And when I was going through that, I realized that giving out numbers and figures really doesn't matter. And I realized that if I give, last year I gave maybe number of tables, comparison here and there, it doesn't sink in. So what I tried to do this year is simplify a little more and point-wise with some hyperlinks, and let's hope that something goes across. But to understand the defense budget, it is essential we know a little bit about the union budget, because the defense budget comes out of the union budget, and every year the union budget has been a series which is contributing towards the economy of the nation, and that is what the government's emphasis has been. So government maintains that through the budget it is improving the economic trajectory. I have taken this slide from something that is floating around in the social media. So how it will grow, what is the aim, transfer, aspiration to achievement. So I'm sure this is a generic slide, but what I'm saying is the Government of India has a specific plan when it makes a budget. At least it shows on paper the plan. How are they going to do it? And there are 6 pillars: sustainable growth, strengthening foundation, and all 6 of them, if you go through budget, will have many key features which align towards the growth and development. Coming to the numbers. So as you know, union budget is nothing but a balance sheet of what you receive and what you spend. And that is where the crux of this whole problem lies, because invariably in all the countries, maybe China apart, you receive less and spend more. So while in this the total is 50 lakhs, 65, 345, this is in crores of rupees. The expenditure is also so similar. But if you see that the borrowings are worth 15 lakhs and other receipts of 45,000. So out of this is born the deficits, which become a measure of the strength of an economy, fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, and that is what I have tried to cap here. The fiscal deficit has been the point of interest. This time, the finance minister did make it a point in the speech to state that the government of India had stuck to the fiscal deficit that she said, I think 5 years back. I'll bring it back to less than 4.4 in the year, the current year, and she has got it to 4.3. 4.3% of the GDP. Which economic wise makes good sense. In fact, this is one of the plus points the government has got in the reviews that one read after, that one has, despite all the development projects that government has taken up, has been able to cap the fiscal deficit to this level. And this over the years, how it has come down. So if you see over the years how the fiscal deficit has come down, and that is the point I was trying to make in the last slide. The first two are important, the other two, since the slide had it, I picked it up, but primary deficit is fiscal deficit minus interest payments. Okay. From here I take on to the MOD budget. Now, as you all know that the Ministry of Defence always gets the maximum allocation in terms of money for expenditure in any budget. Invariably, I think, I don't recollect, other than the Finance Ministry, the Finance Ministry actually doesn't spend, it gives. All of the ministries will spend, and it has, I think this time got 14.7% allocation of the entire budget has come to defence. Always it is the highest, and the closest is quite down in respect of the MOD. And that is where the director also said that there is this huge debate, constant huge debate. Are you spending more on defence? Are you spending more on defence? Fortunately, this debate has died down, has seen hopefully a partial death thanks to Op Sindoor. And this budget has to be looked in perspective of Op Sindoor, because that is what has driven both the government and people to understand why defence budget is so important. I think I explained this last time also, that the defence budget comes in 4 demands. There are 44 demands, something like that. Little fuzzy on my knowledge. 44 demands, and the Defence Ministry has 4 of them, 19 to 22. The first one is civil, the last one is pension. So it is 20 and 21 which always come under the so-called scrutiny. And out of that, the 21 comes under more scrutiny because that is what is called the modernization budget. The capital budget is the modernization budget. Now if you see, the modernization budget in bracket this year has been raised by 27.9%. Last year, if I recollect, was 1,80,000 crores. This year is 2,19,000 crores. It's a substantial hike of 27.9%. We'll come to it. We'll come to the reason, what, how, and I think more than anything, understanding as to what the defence budget means to all of us, those who are associated Ministry of Defence and those who can carry this message out, is more important. So, I will come to, so like I said, I will try to avoid how much is demand number 19 and all that. Some comments that are, straight away, it is the highest budget ever. I think a jump of 27, that is wrong, that is total allocation. Highest ever capital budget. Oh no, correct, that is correct, is overall. So, capital budget is highest ever, 21.8 change. Out of this, so the understanding that the entire capital budget goes towards modernization is a wrong understanding. It's only part of it goes, and in this case, 1,85,000 crores have been allocated for modernization, means procurement. Procurement of new weapon systems. Out of that, 1,39,000, as William Mahajan in one of his YouTube one has said, 75% goes to indigenous modernization through indigenous resources. That is a stipulation that government has laid, and this is where it is leading to Atma Viksit, Atmanirbhar Bharat. These changes have happened over the years in the way the budget has been structured, and the budget has been allocated. So I'll explain this a little bit. I have jumped straight to 21. 20 I'll cover later, because that is what is significant to all of us. When I asked that question in in my blog, when I asked that question in my blog, I had asked what does it matter? Why do we want to listen to a budget? So only two things matter for us, defense. One is the armed forces going to modernize in a greater way or not modernize? And second, as an ordinary person, are things going to be more cheaper? Do I pay less income tax or not? Only these three things matters to defense people. Out of defense, only two things matter, whether things are going to be cheaper and am I going to pay income tax less or not. So, the capital acquisition budget from last 2 years has been clubbed into a single service budget. I don't know whether you understand this or not. Earlier, each service, that is Army, Air Force, Navy, used to get dedicated allocation for its capital budget, for Army, for Navy and for the Air Force. Since the last 2 years, 3 years back it was, maybe 3 years, the government has clubbed capital acquisition budget under one head. And out of that is drawn the capital budget for each of the services. What does it mean? It means the demand of grant document that comes, you don't get an allocation for Army, Air Force and Navy. You cannot, it is not written Army will get so much, Navy will get so much. It comes under one thing and you have to, either you have to be inside to know or you have to speculate. Now, what I have written here is what from the public domain I have been able to capture. Because of Ops Sindhu, the capital budget has been prioritized for the Air Force, Army and the Navy. Probably that is how this visualize the utilization of the forces is going to take place. And that is why a lot of allocation has gone to the Air Force. Of course, Air Force is not many. There is no Air Force left?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. So as you will bring it out, there are a lot of acquisitions to be made and I'll leave it to his later. The Army, probably lesser than Air Force, and Navy, probably the least. That is because naval employment was an option less than everybody else. Now, all this,
use the keyboard. माउस का कीबोर्ड भी है
नहीं, इधर नहीं.
वो माउस या सर को दे दो
So, if you see, the demand number 21 capital actually comes something like these are not the complete heads. There are many more. I just plucked out the important ones. It comes like this. Now, let's say aero engines. Now, look at the aero engines in below. The one above, I am at the moment not concentrating on because the modernization is ones that are in red. It has got a generic allotment of 63,733,000 crores. Now this could go to Air Force, this could go to the Army, this could go also to the Navy. Out of this would be the deal that goes through the multi-role or 114 Rafale aircrafts. Out of this would also go to the drones probably of the Army. I do not know because I do not have that breakdown available in the public domain. Similarly, heavy and medium vehicles, across the board, it will be applicable for all the three. This is the singular change that has happened. And why has this change happened? This change has happened primarily because I think the government has kept with itself the flexibility to move capitalization budget across seamlessly from one service to another without really going into the process of moving from a major head to major head, minor head to minor head. There are implications that the finance guy will tell you. To ease that out, they have done this. Now, I know for certain that there is a lot of modernization which is in process. modernisation which is going to come in. But I wish to also put in a point here that of all this, in the capital acquisition, all the money is not available. There is something called, and last time also I brought this point about, something called as the committed liabilities. The committed liabilities are liabilities which you take on when you sign a contract. When you sign a contract, it is like an EMI. You pay a certain amount today, next year, next year. And that's how what you do is you kind of use your finance in much better manner. But because of Op Sindhu, the government went into a number of emergency contracts for weapons and ammunition. And it is believed that a lot of that would have found its place in the committed liability. This is not known. I also don't know how much it is. But one thing is I'm sure that a lot of committed liabilities would occur this year. R&D has got a boost. So the capital budget has R&D and the revenue budget shows DRD. I presume that it is one and the same thing. The DRDO has got some boost in its revenue, not much, 2.6%. But in the capital part, R&D has got a boost because DRDO is getting into some serious, innovation. And a slide is coming on that, a point is coming later on that. Surprisingly, the paying allowances have remained almost stable. In case of Air Force and Navy, actually is dipped. They are into minus figure. Okay. So this is management of cadre. I guess that is true. But what was most surprising was that while paying allowances remained stable, Agniveer scheme, which the demand for grants called the Agnipat scheme, has got substantial allocation across the three services. It has got so if you see in case of Army, it has got a 61.2% raise. Navy is 49% raise and 25.6% raise in terms of Agnipat scheme. So government is going full hog on Agnipat scheme for all those people who are against the Agniveer. I think that's a story which is long laid to rest. I also bring the point that ECHS has got a substantial raise this year. Now ECHS as a head has found itself in the revenue army. So I believe, I can understand maybe revenue army looks after the ECHS for everyone. It has got a 45% raise. This is a good news for all ex-servicemen and hopefully that will satisfy at least the shortage of medicines would go hopefully. Noticed that the revenue budget, there are 4 or 5 heads which used to go to respective service like the capital budget, like transportation, work, stores, construction, one thing more, repairs or something like that, have now come under a central head, and it is clubbed as one. Clubbed as one minor head. Although it is gone to various service, but clubbed as minor head and not clubbed with the revenue budget minor head of the services. I'll just show you what I mean to say. And what does it mean? Basically, can you, I don't know whether you can see or not, but this is demand number 20 here. And Army, Navy, Air Force, all these transportation are clubbed under other central sector expenditure. what it means typically is this has come under operational expenditure. So a central authority like maybe CDS has the ability to monitor, check, allocate. So the individual services will not have a direct lien on them, they will have a lien through the CDS. It is in line with the ultimate concept of integration and centralization. I already mentioned, so DRDO is doing some serious research. Now there is, Air Force would know that we are trying to improve on the Kaveri engine. The GTRE engines, I understand, 120 kilonewtons. So that's a requirement, including some gallium nitrate chips. I think these chips are meant for high-end technological weapon systems that DRDO is trying to research upon, and that is why their R&D budget has got increased. I have a slide on pension bill. This is the last slide actually. I have a brief on pension bill. There always has been rancor that the pension bill is mounting, and how to cap it. The government has done something. This year the pension bill has seen a marginal rise. Now I tried to tabulate the pension bill, and I realized that there is not a uniform pattern. Every alternate year there is an increase of pension. But next. So this is what I have been able to get. That on annual rate 12% it is being increased, and on an average it has grown by 8.4%. Now it is because of that the government introduced the Agniveer scheme. The Agniveer scheme will come into play only, as far as the pension is concerned, only in 2030, not before that. But yet somebody could ask as to how the pension bill has come down or been capped. Now there is one attribute in the budget which I have read and I am not too sure, to state that the disability pension is going to be taxed. So,
That won't affect this number, sir.
no, so that won't affect this number, but that was one of the, that obviously would affect, but that may be one of the way of government trying to cap the pension bill in future. And I do not know as to
Number of retirees have died, more number of people have died, so therefore the pension is less, because there is no other factor which can affect immediate
Sir,
1.4.
actually, Agnipath has started affecting in some way already.
But number of retirees won't, Agnipath of...
So anyway, this is a food for thought. I leave it to a better judgment as to why, but this is the reality. Now, my last point is defense budget, and I say as a percentage of GDP. And this year, this is coming to great kind of discussion as to should India go in for a higher allocation of defense budget or not. This year it is 2.4% of the GDP. Now, up till now we were almost around 2%, sometimes lesser than that, and I did cap this also. There is no uniformity. If you see the expenditure percentage of GDP, it's up and down. And this is the NDA, this is the UPA. 4 times it has gone down, 4 times it has gone down. So it has nothing to do with the government. It is obviously got to do something with the stability of the economy at that point in time. Now hereafter, 1.9 to 2.4. So Sindoor has actually compelled the government to take it up. My argument is, should India take it any further or not? It all depends on how you look at the world. So this is the defense spending and this is percent of the GDP. So China supposedly spends only 1.7 but has $314 billion. And we have only 90 billion. It's about 9. This is 2002-04, so China is about 2, I think. US is $1 trillion defense budget spending. So, got to look at how the countries spend their budget vis-a-vis us and then decide. My feeling is, and I am discussing this is because it's a food for thought. Should we go up? Should we not go up? Ukraine, wartime, has gone today as spending 34% of its GDP in defense budget. Things are not very good in India's neighborhood. This doesn't seem to be going right either way. I really do not know whether the future budgets will have more in terms of GDP or less. But surely, if Ops Sindoor is any measure, it will be difficult for the budget, for the government to take it any lesser. I have finished. We can take on the question and answers later. Thank you.
The next speaker we have is from the Air Force, and what General Gadkari was looking around, we have the Air Force argument now. Group Captain Purohit will be discussing the Air Force aspects. He has served over 32 years in the Air Force with flying hours of 5,500. He's done an MPhil in Defense and Management Studies, and he writes extensively on geopolitics, international relations, defense and strategic issues. He publishes articles in various journals, including the Journal of Defense Studies, APA Journal, CAW Journal, Defense Journal and Defense Bulletin. He's also written in various newspapers like Financial Express, Indian Express, Sakar, Tarun Bharat and Millennium Post. Over to Group Captain Purohit for the presentation.
Thank you, sir, and very good morning to all. Firstly, thanks to CAS as well as the National Academy of Defense Financial Management for having invited me here on this day. And this is the annual session when we bombard you with a lot of data, charts and tables. This time, the beginning has not been with those, but I promise to break the mold with a few tables and charts that I intend to show. And my presentation is going to be a little beyond headlines. In fact, I have a slide which states that beyond headlines. So let's see how it goes. And as I begin with a quote normally, this is what the erudite Dr. Shashi Tharoor has said about the defense budget. And I think it's very, very important. That, and I quote him, we don't spend on the defense budget to wage a war. We do it to discourage other countries from feeling we are weak. And since we have been talking about Operation Sindoor, the fact that somebody could dare to do it with the data that I would show, the past data, perhaps somebody got emboldened to try and test our resolve and patience. So to begin with, there are certain background facts. The external security threats to India have increased since the Doklam crisis of 2017. And this is again proven with a lot of data, and we know what has happened in 17, we know what happened in 2020, the standoff actually still goes on. The creation of a non-lapsable defense capital modernization fund was recommended by the 15th Finance Commission, but vetoed by the Ministry of Finance since it was violative of a certain provision of the Indian Constitution. The 16th Finance Commission has remained silent and they have steered clear of this particular issue. India's defense budgets are in nominal terms and do not cater for inflation. That is something we need to also bear in mind. And between 15-16 and 24-25, the allocation to the armed forces was 20% lower than their projected needs. Capital outlay has remained below 30% of the defense budget. And certain data, 2013-14, it was 32% of the defense budget, but thereafter it has declined. And you can see it on the chart. The yellow line is what is the declining share of the capital outlay. And if you see again from 14-15 to right till this year's budget estimate, also the allocation for capital outlay is less than 30% of the total defense budget. Now let's see capital expenditure versus defense expenditure. Now this is declined both as a center's percentage of GDP as well as the center's budget. So in 14-15 the defense spending accounted for 17% of the union spending, and as per this budget estimate it has reduced to 14.67%. Last year's RE it was 14.7%. I now switch over to the 16 Finance Commission, which was tabled just on the eve of the budget. And what are some of the major takeaways from that? Because when we have this debate about capital revenue, we need to understand that where it flows from and how the capital and revenue in the union budget overall is distributed. So if you see the major items of revenue expenditure as a percentage of the GDP, in 11-12 we had interest payments amounting to 3.1%, defense was 1.2%, and subsidies were 2.5%. See the change that has occurred. Interest payments have climbed up except for declining in 19-20, and 25-26, and this is as per the Finance Commission report, they constitute 3.6% of the GDP is just interest payments, 0.9% is defense, and 1.2% are subsidies. I will give you the subsidies figure a little later. The major components of capital expenditure of the union as a percentage of GDP, I have taken just three factors: defense, railways, roads and bridges. Look at defense, from 0.8 it has now come down to 0.5. Railways from 0.2 has gone up to 0.7, and roads and bridges from 0.1 has gone up to 0.7. So you can see that railways, roads and bridges make 1.4% of the GDP, defense 0.5. This is capital expenditure of the GDP. And this is what it shows. You can see here, the orange one is the defense. You can see it steadily coming down. Railways has been going up, roads and bridges has been going up, and other communication services has also risen slightly, and overall capital expenditure has significantly increased after 1920. That is of the union. The next is the Finance Commission. 16 Finance Commission expects that the salary component, and this is not of the defense, it is of the entire union, is expected to grow at 6% per annum. And I would like the audience to remember this figure. Non-salary component of revenue expenditure is expected to grow at 15%. Defense capital expenditure they expect to grow at 30% annually. And the Finance Commission has reiterated the attention and drawn the attention of the government to the adverse effects of subsidies, cash incentives and in-kind transfers. I have just given this last bullet as a figure from the 16 Finance Commission, and this is the power subsidies by the states. This is not to do with the union budget, but just see the amount for 23-24, it amounted to 2.62 lakh crores. And when you see the defense capital allocation, you would find the mathematics, how close it is. So coming to the union budget highlights quickly, this has already been covered. The estimate, and I have gone a little differently. I am comparing the budget estimates for this year with the revised estimates of last year, because that is actually what would be spent. Actuals may differ a little bit, but rather than BE on BE, I am comparing RE on BE. Interest payments, 26% of the total expenditure. This is central spending, and this is 10% increase over the revised estimates of 25-26. So this is also a significant amount. And the chart is given here. 6.6% is the increase in revenue. 11.5% is what the center union expects to spend additionally on capital as compared to the revised estimates of last year. Now here is an interesting point: disinvestment. We know that the union government has been trying to disinvest since the turn of the century. the target for this year in the budget estimates is 80,000 crores. The problem is that disinvestment targets, and I'll show it with the graphic, have not been achieved for the last 7 consecutive years. And here is the, so if you see that encircled portion right from 2021 onwards, the target set has been pretty good, but achievements have not materialized. Subsequently, even the targets have been reduced. And last year's budget, the target was about 40,000 crores, and the achievement was some 33,000 crores, about 70 odd %. So there is a problem in this because this gives the government money to actually allocate for certain needy sectors. Now, this slide shows the percentage increase in the central government expenditure versus increase in the defense expenditure, and I have taken the data from 15-16 to 26-27. And you find that if you look on the left, 10.4 is the government expenditure at that is the annual rate of 10.4%. This is nominal. And at the same time in this period, the defense spending has increased by 9.3%, and defense spending is the entire defense budget, all the 4 demands. However, calculated for inflation, the real CAGR of the union government has been 5.1% of increase in spend, while that for defense has been 4.3%. And that is the real money that you actually have to modernize, spend, and cater for all the day-to-day activities. So now I have flagged certain areas of concern. The allocation for subsidies in this year's budget is a whopping 4.54 lakh crores, and that is 8.5% of the government spending in this budget. That is for subsidies alone. The outstanding liabilities of the government amount to approximately 55.6% of the GDP. The government aims to reduce it, as per the Finance Commission report, to about 50 plus minus 1% by March 2031, which is another about 5 years. The real defense CAGR I have mentioned is 4.3%, and the disinvestment target here is the figure. Against 40,000 crores, we achieved about 33,837 crores in the last financial year. Now coming to the defense budget quickly, this is the share which has already been covered. Quickly to rush through, 46.5% is the revenue, 22.85% is pensions, 3.64 is MOD civil, that is demand number 19, and 27.94% is the capital share for the capital expenditure. So this allocation of 7.84 lakh crores for the defense is a 7.1% increase from the RE of 25-26. So it amounts to, in figurative terms, 52,166 crores. The total allocation to MOD is 14.67% of the union budget and 1.9% of the GDP. Actually, it's about 1.97 or so. Some reports stated as 2, they have rounded off. But the 0.03 also makes significant difference of a few thousand crores. As far as demand number 22, pensions including retirement benefits, and here I would like to clarify that this demand number 22 also includes your retirement benefits, includes all your gratuity, your leave encashment, commutated value of pension. So it is not just the pension which a person is getting, it's all these things which also a person gets when he retires. As well as this demand also has awards, that is gallantry awards, etc., or the monetary awards that you get for gallantry awards. This includes that. So there is a percentage increase of only 1.27% from the RE of last year. It's capital outlay, I have mentioned increase of 17.61% from the RE of last year. As far as the revenue, it is 4.49% increase from the RE of last year. The figures are here. I'll give 15 seconds for those figures to sink in. And here are some statistics that are beyond the headlines. The defense services are budgeted to pay a spectrum charge of 37,200 crores to the Department of Telecommunication in this year's budget estimates, and that is 10.17% of the total revenue outlay. The ECH's allocation under revenue, ECH has got 2 allocations, one under capital as well as under revenue, is 12,100 crores. On the face of it, it looks good. it's increase of 10% over the RE of 25-26. But if you see the BE of 25-26, it was quite low at about 8,000 and few crores. And it was after a lot of brouhaha that arose over the ECHS funding that the allocation increased in the revised estimate to I think 11,000 crores. And but it is just 10.85% over the actual expenditure of 24-25. So now I have written but, and I'll here will take a few seconds to explain why that but. In my research, what came out was, and through a lot of official sources, in the sense, the medical inflation in India is about 14 to 15%, and it is the highest in Asia. So my small but significant point is that this 10% increase does not really cater for medical inflation. And we know the case recently where there is no empaneled hospital in Goa, in the state of Goa. The only one that was left has also got itself disempaneled because of lack of funds. I mean, payments not coming in time. Now here is another thing which I found, the outflow from defense budget pensions. For bank charges, due to Sparsh services is rupees 4 crores. Last year, revised estimates is 4.5 crores. There is an appreciable increase in the ECH allocation in the capital head from 50 crores to 60.26 crores, which is good, which means there would be some infrastructure creation for ECHS, polyclinics, etc. Coming to certain aspects of the IF, this is the Air Force trend. Again, what has happened is, if you see that yellow line as a share of the total modernization budget, has shown a decline, except from about 22-23, it's shown a slight increase. This data is still 23-24, after which the clubbing has started. So we don't really know exactly how much the allocation was. But point I'm trying to make now here is that if you see from 15-16 or so, this dip in the capital expenditure, and FOS has always allocated sometimes more than the allocated funds they have been reappropriated. Are we in the 29th quadrant state today because is this the cause? Is food for thought. I would like to leave the audience with. As far as the capital expenditure is concerned, for the projects of IF, there is a particular clause, projects of IF. The RE for last year was 1650.91. This year's BE is 1618.81, and this is a decline. This projects of IF is actually for technology development projects under the make category for the Indian Air Force. And this reduced allocation is actually, I feel, a little unhealthy, because how does technology development take place unless it is funded? Next is, and Air Force being the most technologically dependent element of the Troika, I think this is a little cause of concern. The next is aircraft and aero engines. General Gadkari mentioned. Now this is aircraft and aero engines not only for the IF, it is overall for the defense services. The revised estimates for last year were 72,780. This year the budget estimate is 63,733. In fact, again, so from the RE it is a dip. And I feel there is an adverse effect likely on the quantity of acquisition. There may not be so much on the number, the types that we are going to get. Other equipment is another thing which is has shown a good increase of 61.9% over the RE. But here is a catch, the last bullet. In the RE of 25-26, that figure which I have taken, actually had additional allocation in the budget estimates, and 12,338.78 crores, 76 crores was unspent, and therefore the RE has come down, and now therefore this budget estimate shows a significant jump of 61.9. The question is, why was this unspent in other equipment? And other equipment is where a lot of other capital expenditure for systems such as UAVs, unmanned aerial systems, radars, EW systems, simulators, and all the support equipment required for managing these operational equipment is done. So this is, I feel, again a significant thing which all the headlines have glossed over. And now I come to this air power capability enhancement. Now, in the pipeline where I mentioned, I would just draw your attention because the pointer doesn't work on this. LCA Mark 1A, the first 5 till LCH, these are the aircraft where the contracts have been signed. So the quantity is given, the contracts for the number of those platforms. The cost, contract cost as available in the open domain has been cited and in PIB statements. The spread over, that figure which is given, spread over 10 years, 5 years, is basically from the time of contract till the delivery of the last platform. That is what I have taken. And therefore I have done an average outflow per year. It may not be exactly that, but it is to get a understand the idea as to whether the allocation is enough or not. I have given the average outflow per year for each platform. And now, based on when the contract was signed till date, I have assumed the balance payment left is, like in case of LCA Mark 1A, it's 6 years. For Rafale Marine, 4 years. So I have taken that since the time of signing of the contract. And then the figures have been calculated. That if you see, the total cost of these 5 platforms, 2,89,707 crores. Now, if you take the balance, if you take the rightmost column remarks, 2,04,654 crores of rupees are required over the next 6 years. So I have taken 6 years, which means comes to an average of 34,109 per year. These will be under the aircraft and aero engines, that head which was mentioned earlier. Now the MRFA. President Macron is visiting India, I think next week, if I am not wrong. And the DAC is supposed to be meeting sometime this week, with news reports stating that the DAC is likely to give the AON for the MRFA, which is 114 aircraft, in all probability Rafale. So if that happens, of course the CCS approval will take time. But the media reports also say that the contract would be signed in this particular financial year, 26-27. And the value is given somewhere like 3.25 lakh crores for 114 MRFA. If that be the case and that delivery period spread over 8 years from the time of contract signing, average outflow per year comes to 40,625 crores. Now you add this 40,625 crores to 34,109 crores. So for the next 6 years, your requirement per year goes to 74,734 crores only for these platforms. And over 6 years it goes to 4.48 lakh crores. Subsidies 4.52 lakh crores for a year. This is over 6 years. But then is this all? I mean, air power is not this only. You have the AMCA, you have the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, is supposed to be coming in the next few years. The surface-to-air guided weapons, there are already reports about buying some more S-400 squadrons. There are a lot of indigenous SAGW which need to be procured. Unmanned aerial systems, counter unmanned aerial systems, radars, airborne early warning and control aircraft, which has been a significant lacuna in us. We don't have the numbers, adequate numbers. The FRA flight refueling aircraft, the case for the Airbus A330 MRTT has been twice cancelled. We still do not have adequate number of air-to-air refuelers. Trainer aircraft, we are still persisting with the Kiran Mark II and the PC-7, of course, is not too old, 12 years. But then the HTT-40, the indigenous basic trainer aircraft is supposed to be coming. Money is required for that. Helicopters like the IMRH, which is for the Navy, the multi-role helicopter for the Air Force, the LUH for the Air Force Navy. So all this is going to require substantial amount of money. Then what about committed liabilities to pending payments? That point which General Gadkari also brought out. Since committed liabilities data for the last about 4 or 5 years has not been published, we really don't know what are the committed liabilities. Overall of aircraft and aero engines, there would be aircraft and aero engines required for overall. In some cases they would be indigenous, done within the country, in some cases outside. That money also goes from that aircraft and aero engines head. And then nobody's been talking about it, but replacement of IL-76 and AN-32. Both these platforms are more than 4 decades old, and spares, etc. are becoming a challenge. Serviceability becomes a challenge. Time to think for the replacement has actually gone, but even if we start now, hopefully the money is going to be required for that. And therefore, the allocation for capital expenditure is headline grabbing but inadequate, in my opinion. And procedure for utilizing funds, whatever are available, has to be speedy and smooth. And this is where every organ of the Ministry of Defence, Ministry of Finance needs to work in tandem to make sure that we are outcome oriented and not process oriented. Coming to the revenue budget, total allocation is here. I have mentioned 4.49% increase. For the three services, when I take only the Army, Navy, Air Force, it's just an increase of 4.53% over the RE. And the allocation distribution is as given. The figure in the green is the Army has a share of 66.55%, the Navy 12.80% and Air Force 17.27%. Now coming to the Air Force again specifically, pay and allowances of the Air Force, the increase is just 0.4% from the RE. Pay and allowances of the Air Force civilians in Air Force 7.64% increase. Transportation, stores, marginal increase, not really much. But the works, the Air Force works is showing a decline of 2.03%, which again I feel is not really healthy. One hopes that additional allocation comes because Air Force works are very important for the simple reason that if a weapon has to hit your runway has to be very strong, your runway rehabilitation scheme has to be good. For that money comes from these Air Force works. Agnipath has shown an increase of 15.4, which was mentioned. Special projects of the Air Force, no increase, it stays at 1 crore only. And other expenditure has shown an increase of 9.89%, which is revenue receipts is dynamic, we will not go into it. Spectrum charges, Air Force revised estimates was 10,000 crores out of the last year. This year it is 8,394 out of the total 37,200 crores. As far as the pay and allowances are concerned, Army less civilians, this is the breakdown, Navy less civilians, Air Force less civilians, and the second chart gives you the Army civilians, Navy civilians, Air Force civilians and R&D civilians. So, the about 11.5% of the pay and allowances of the defence services total are spent on civilians in the three services and in R&D, and in the Air Force 10.86% of the pay and allowances are spent on the civilian component of the Air Force. Now the expenditure on pay and allowances as a percentage of total MOD revenue budget, the Army is 32.33, Navy is 2.64, Air Force is 5.61, and overall if you take all the three services 40.59. IF pay and allowances is 5.84 of the MOD revenue expenditure last year. This year it has come down to 5.61, the same point which General Gadkari was mentioning, it's actually come down. And annual per capita expenditure on pay and allowances of the IF, this is based on my calculations as per details available in the open domain and the budget figures, is about 0.12 crores per annum per capita of the total strength, which is about a lakh per month, pay and allowances. And I have done the calculations for the Navy and the Army also. Navy it's about 0.13, Army is 0.10. Overall it is 0.10 for the defence services. The pension share of the IF is 10.30%, and if you see the variation in the IF, the pension percentage is actually come down by 0.05% in this year's budget estimates. The overall variation in defence of the three services is plus 1.27%. So certain issues for reflection. Now every capital acquisition has a concomitant revenue, effect on the revenue budget. It cannot be that we can just increase the capital and without any revenue. The revenue will have to keep pace and maybe in the same proportion. Bank service charges of Sparsh. There is a point I would like to throw open subsequently. In this age of digitization, why should the Defence Accounts Department or the Ministry of Defence pay these service charges to banks? The net profit of SBI 24-25 financial year was over 17,000 crore rupees. And SBI is one of the largest beneficiary of Sparsh because I think most of the accounts are in. Why should they charge? They can either give it through their CSR. I would put it this way, this additional 4 crores would be better spent in ECHS where the need is very, very high. Now, ECHS allocation should be increased to cater to medical inflation and the growth of beneficiaries, what Brigadier Mahajan was pointing out some time back. Every year you are going to have beneficiaries added to ECHS. The allocation, the rise in allocation needs to cater for this medical inflation plus the increase in annuity. Now, where do we get the money for capital expenditure? Well, I have a simple solution. It is not so simple, I understand. Through aggressive disinvestment and reduction in subsidies plus interest payments. Some portion of that, if it's given to the capital expenditure of the defense every year, even if we get an increase, say let's say 1 lakh crore per year and year on year increasing by 10% for the next about decade or so, I am pretty confident that China will never dare to do what they did in Ladakh in 2020, because that would be the power that would act as a deterrent to them. Now air power, just to revise, can reach farthest, hit fastest, is most precise and most potent. And therefore, if it is not wrong to say that it is the hukum ka ikka in the troika of kinetic force that the nation possesses. And therefore, underinvestment in air power invites strategic setbacks. That underinvestment which I brought out in that chart earlier, perhaps time to reason, has led to this situation where the adversaries feel emboldened to try something with us. And a strong defense budget funds peace, not war. Now, we all love peace, and I am also a man of peace, but then unfortunately, if the world was so good, then there wouldn't have been a need for a defense budget. But then that is not the reality. And therefore, I would like to end with a quote made, this was a quote by Barack Obama, and this was in his speech when he won the Nobel Prize in his award acceptance speech. And the quote goes as such: "For make no mistake, evil does exist in the world. A non-violent movement could not have halted Hitler's armies. Negotiations cannot convince Al-Qaeda's leaders to lay down their arms. To say that force may sometimes be necessary is not a call to cynicism. It is a recognition of history, the imperfections of man, and the limits of reason." Unquote. Now, as it's said in Star Wars, may the force be with you. If we want that force to be with us, if we want that force to deter our adversaries, gentlemen, my simple submission is that the funding and the spending both have to improve. Thank you very much for your attention.
Go ahead, come back to the court. We carry on pretty well. Next speaker. Before that, thank you.
Indian name.
Thank you to Captain Purohit for that quote of Barack Obama. We'll send it to the Ministry of Defense. So the next speaker we have is from the Navy, Rear Admiral Nadkarni. Rear Admiral Nadkarni is an ND specialist and a graduate of DSSC, College of Naval Warfare and NDC. During his career of 37 years, he held important command, training and staff appointments, including 3 years as Director of Naval Intelligence Operations at Naval Headquarters. Post-retirement, he settled down at Pune and is an active member of CAS and Indian Maritime Foundation. Over to Admiral Nadkarni.
Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I think in a panel discussion of this type, it is inevitable that there will be some kind of duplication between the speakers. But I am also very grateful to my previous two speakers, because that will make my job a little easier, since I can just sort of skim over the parts which they have already covered. My presentation also will be slightly different from theirs in the sense that I am also talking a little bit of the innovation and international initiatives taken by the Indian Navy, as well as the big ticket projects, both which are already in progress and as well as those which are likely to be there in the pipeline. The scope of the presentation therefore is as shown on the screen. I'll first carry out a very brief analysis of the overall defense budget, and like I said, I'll skim over some slides. Then I'll go a little more into detail as regards the Indian Navy budget. Then I'll talk about the initiatives taken by the Indian Navy, then the ship projects, and I'll end up with the key takeaways. This is the defense budget which already has been covered, so I'll not sort of dwell on that. And this is the way that the defense budget has risen in the past about 7 years. This is a percentage rise in the defense budget year on year from 2020-21 to 2026-27. And though the last rise was significant, 15.27, there have been others also in the past, such as the one from 22 to 2022-23 to 2023-24. This is the increase in the budget allocations, which again has been covered. Just being on for 5 seconds. And these are the capital allocations which have been made. Coming to the breakdown of the capital allocations, other speakers have talked about other aspects of this. I'll specifically highlight two which are very specific to the Navy, and those are the naval fleet, and the second one is the one concerning the naval dockyards and projects, which are shown on the screen. So some of the highlights of the capital allocation are as shown. As far as the naval fleet is concerned, the allocation now is about 25,000 crores, which is a rise of about 600 odd crores. And the naval dockyards and projects are allocated 4,300 odd crores, which is a slight decline of about 166 crores. Also, I would like to bring your notice to this particular aspect of the capital allocations, which are the investment in public enterprises. And amongst these are a number of shipyards, such as Hindustan Shipyard, Masconda, Goa Shipyard, and Garden Beach, which have been given certain allocations. Now, noticeably, point of note is that these are not for constructions. The constructions will go from the service budget. These are for basically expansion and modernization of the shipyards themselves, so that they can increase their capacity and build more than what they already are doing at the moment. Of course, if you notice the percentage change, it is, I would say, fairly moderate in most cases, especially with regard to the shipyards. Coming to the revenue budget allocations, these are already covered. The revenue budget for the Navy is now 46,800 crores has been brought out, which represents an increase of about 22.6% over the last year. That is the last budget estimates, not the revised estimates. And some of the highlights of the revenue budgets again are as shown. One point of note which also has been covered to some extent by the previous speakers is the aspect of the defense pensions, which is now about 1.7 lakh crores and covers about 32 lakh service and family pensioners and represents about 21.8% of the overall defense budget. Now, what I would like to highlight is the pensions is about 82% of the total amount which is being spent on pay and allowances of serving personnel in the services. And the pensions as a part of the total budget has been going down, so that is, I think, a heartening feature. So, this aspect about when the introduction of or the effect of the Agnipath scheme will take force, I would say, considering that they have been inducted from around end 2022 and 4 years after that, I think 75% also will be likely to go out of service. After that, another 11 years, so total 15 years from that, so we would be taken to around 2037, when I think that Agnipath would probably come into effect. I think the CTA probably would analyze this a little more in detail during their presentation. Also, as General Gadkari has mentioned, the defense budget as a part of the GDP is generally oscillating around 2%, and it's also shown here in the form of a graph. And as you can see, it is slightly on the downward trend. The maximum being about 2.34% almost in 2020-21. And this is a comparison of what the major nations in the world spend on defense in terms of percentage. So for example, if X number is spent on defense worldwide, the US spends that much. Actually, I can't see the figures from where I'm standing, but India is fairly low down, as you can see in this particular pie chart. So the major nations which are spending the maximum on defense is India, the US, and secondly China, and certainly we are I think 5th on this list, and much less than what they are spending. And this also been alluded to by General Gadkari in terms of what nations are spending as part of the GDP. As I mentioned, it is 2% in the case of India. Other nations are spending much more. China has also got out spending about 1.7. Their GDP, which is given in the public domain, is about 314 crores. But most analysts feel that the actual GDP is far more than, the defense spending is far more than this. It's about almost $500 billion, which is due to the hidden R&D and internal security costs. So we have to take whatever figures are shown in terms of China with a grain of salt and expect that they will actually be spending far more than what is shown here. Other figures, Pakistan is spending about 2.7%. Russia is spending as much as 7%. That is largely, I am sure, due to the ongoing war with Ukraine. And countries such as Japan, for example, are spending 1.4%, but Japan has a fairly sizable GDP itself. And our defense spending is partially based on indigenous construction and projects, and partially also what we are importing from other countries. There has been a reduction over the last, say, 5 years from 2020 and 24, but still we are the second largest importer on this list after Ukraine. And Ukraine is again obviously due to this ongoing war with Russia, and it is getting a large number of arms and ordnance from the United States as well as some European countries. We have a present figure of about 8.3%, but there has been a decline if you consider the previous figures, which were about 9.3 or so. So this is certainly a very heartening aspect of our defense imports. And this shows the arms imports, if you compare it with China and Pakistan. These are for 15 years from about 2000 to 2015, and I have drawn a trend line which represents all the three figures, three countries as well. So for example,
That can be seen, you have to go physically.
so blue India, red China, green Pakistan. India trending upwards, China trending downwards, and Pakistan also very slightly upwards. But if you see the next year, few years, 2015 to 24, now you can see that the Indian graph is trending downwards, though there have been some spikes in between. And more notably, the Chinese graph has almost gone to zero. So this means that China now is almost entirely producing all its arms and ammunition indigenously, unlike previously when they used from the Russians, when they used to also import from some other countries. That was of course much before Tiananmen and all that, when France used to supply them Dolphin helicopters. But since then they have acquired these foreign platforms and reverse engineered them and made them into their own Chinese platforms. Also very heartening to note is the India's defense exports, which have also risen considerably from 2015 and 16 to 2024-25. And the defense exports in 2024-25, which were about 23,000 crores, were 34 times higher than they were in 2013 and 14. And the private sector also, which is very noteworthy, it contributed 64.5% of the total exports. So all these are very indicative of the fact that the Atmanirbhar schemes which the government has implemented are having definitely considerable effect. We export to about 100 countries. The top 3 buyers are the US, France and Armenia. And our major exports are, as shown on the screen, BrahMos, Dorniers, ALH and the Akash missile. The government has set a target to reach about 50,000 crores on the exports by 2028-29. Another aspect which I would like to highlight, however, is the percentage spending on R&D, which in our case is actually abysmally small, I would say. It is just about 0.64. And the reason why I say so is because warfare is changing. We are seeing the induction of many new and very advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence, unmanned platforms which are coming into service in all the wars which have taken place, whether it be the Ukraine-Russia war, whether it be the Armenia-Azerbaijan war, whether it be even our own of Sindhu. We find increased use of UAVs and platforms such as even USVs, that is unmanned surface vessels. No country will actually give you any of these technologies. I mean, they may give you hardware, but the thing which drives the hardware is software and algorithms. And unless you can develop those indigenously, there will be a considerable gap between the countries which are at the leading edge of arms production today, especially in these advanced technologies such as the US and China, and where we are today, India. There is, of course, some good progress, I would say, in some areas, like for example, in terms of unmanned UAVs and unmanned surface vessels. There is a company in Pune called Sagar Defense Engineering, which is supplying these platforms to the Indian Navy. And I would say that they have done an excellent job till now of creating these platforms, almost entirely through their own efforts. But certainly 0.64 needs to go to at least, I would say, 2% if we are to be able to compete with other nations on this level. Coming to the Indian Navy budget, this is shown as the percentage of the naval budget. This is based on a report which was published in the PIB, or as a PIB report, on the 3rd of December 2025. And in this, though previous speakers mentioned that the capital budget is not shown service-wise, however, in this report actually it does bring it out as to what has been spent specifically on the capital expenditure for the Navy. And from about 15.3, you can see that the naval budget has now gone to about 21% of the entire naval budget. And more hearteningly, our capital to revenue ratio has always remained positive. That means we are thinking the only service actually spends more on capital than the revenue vis-a-vis, say, the Army and the Air Force. Again, the same is shown on as a graph. And this is a graph showing the REs versus the actual expenditure. I mean, how much of the budget which has been allotted we have been able to spend. In this, it's not so clear, but I'll show you the next 2 slides. It shows that earlier we had a bit of a shortfall in 2015, 2016. We were not able to spend almost some 2.27 and then over 1.46. But again, this is on the upward trend. So towards the last 2 years, the amount that we have been able to spend on the capital budget actually is almost the same. There's very little difference. Coming to the revenue budget, again, as General Gadkari mentioned, that these 4 heads, transportation, repairs and so on, have been now shifted into another section. So this represents the establishment expenditure of the center, which is about 20,000 odd crores for this financial year. And the difference with the previous budget is about 47%. And coming to the second section, which is the other central sector expenditure, here you have all these heads: transportation, repair, stores and so on. And the total budget amounts to about 46,800 crores. which is an increase of about 6.5% over the previous one. Again, I have drawn trend lines to show how the revenue budget has increased over the years. And more importantly, what has been the actual expenditure vis-a-vis the REs, the revised estimates. And again, you can see that a trend line goes upwards, though there have been some spikes, and many of them have actually been due to what we call black swan events, such as the COVID pandemic. So I think those can be explained based on those events. This is in terms of the percentage. So some significant changes in the naval budget which I would like to highlight, which have taken place in the past 5 years, is that the revenue budget has increased. That is a very gradual increase, I would say. It's not very spectacular. But the capital allocations, that is a spectacular increase, which have increased from about 26,600 crores in 2021 towards 62,500 crores in 25-26. And the capital share has risen from about 8.26% to 13.75%. I think this is a very significant change and shows the greater emphasis now that the government has given to naval projects and naval modernization. So the combined naval budget has also increased from about 7.8% in 2021 to about 21% in 25-26. Some aspects of the Indian Navy's initiatives which I would like to point out are shown in the next few slides. Firstly, the ship has 3 functional groups which is called the float component, the move component and the fight component. The float is essentially the hull, the move is the propulsion and auxiliary machineries, and the fight are naturally the weapons and sensors. So the indigenous content of naval warships is as shown here. The float component is almost 90%. The move component is about 60%, and the fight component, that is the area which we are now concentrating on, it's about 35%. And this is the indigenous ecosystem which I would say we share also in some respects with other services. We have got these organizations, NIIO, then we have the IDEX scheme, we have taken an initiative called SPRINT, we have this region portal, then we have the positive indigenization lists. So the NIIO is something which is specific to the Navy, and essentially it is meant to connect startups, MSMEs, industry and universities. It has the Directorate of Indigenization as part of it. We have something called the Naval Technology Acceleration Council, and we have the Technology Development Acceleration Cell. Then the IDEX is common to all the defense services, and it is a overarching defense innovation framework which provides funding and support to the industries, and it also has something called Defense India Startup Challenges or DISC, which are launched periodically. It offers funding of up to 10 crores for various shortlisted innovators. Then this is a initiative which has been taken by the Navy specifically called SPRINT, which aims to develop and induct at least 75 indigenous technologies. So we have collaborations with MSMEs and startups, and every year we have this thing called Swavalambam. It's a seminar where you have attendance by a large number of these corporate bodies, and we give them proposals, they come out with solutions, and based on that we decide who are the winners. So the numbers are shown in that. Then we have this thing called the Region portal, which is maintained by the Ministry of Defence, which is an online marketplace of imported items which are to be indigenized. As of now, about 38,000 items have been listed, and about 14,000 have been indigenized by the industry. And lastly, we have these positive indigenization lists or PILs. These are released by the MOD saying that what cannot be imported, what has to be produced exclusively in the country. So there are more than 5,500 items as currently, and about 3,000 have been indigenized as of February 2025. Some of the indigenous achievements are now sort of summarized here. We have this Indian Naval Indigenization Plan or INIP. We have 51 ships which are under construction in the country, and recently our 100th and 101st indigenous warships INS Udayagiri and INS Hengiri were commissioned in August 2024, and I would like to say that personally I was in attendance for this commissioning ceremony because I happen to be the commanding officer of the previous INSMBD. So they had called all the previous commanding officers. Since 2014, our shipyards have delivered over 40 indigenous warships. And one new vessel, this is what the CNS has recently said, one new vessel is being inducted on average every 40 days. So nearly 67% of the Navy's capital acquisition is with Indian industries in the last 10 years. Sorry. Yeah, so the Indian Navy will no longer acquire any ships built abroad. However, aircraft, some of the aircraft which I think Group Captain Purohit also mentioned, P-8I or the Navy Rafale or the MH-60R, they will still be imported from abroad. Just a list of various Make-II projects which are basically funded by the government and industry. I won't sort of read all of them, just to give you an idea. And these are the focus areas which are proposed by the Indian Navy under IDEX and the Defence Startup Challenge. Again, very cutting edge technologies that the Navy is trying to promote. Coming to some, just a overview of some major ship projects which have been completed and some which are about to now be progressed. These are the ones which have already been completed. Just like the Air Force has a concern with its fighter squadrons, we have a concern regarding our submarines. Because submarines are, next to the aircraft carrier, the most potent platforms, I would say, in our inventory. And as you can see, though down below if you see, it appears as the figure is going up. But I would just like to highlight that these two submarine classes, the Sindhu Ghosh and the Shishumar class, you can see the first of them were inducted in the 1990s. So they are more than 30, in fact some of them are reaching almost 40 years old. And they are definitely in need for replacement. So therefore, the Indian Navy is very keen that it sort of operationalizes the new submarine projects which are in the pipeline. And the most important one of this, which you would have also read in the papers I'm sure, is this thing called the Project 75 India, which is basically for 6 conventional submarines, they are called SSKs. This is a deal which has been cleared by the Government of India, and the intergovernmental agreement will be finalized by Germany as a Make in India project. It will be constructed under transfer of technologies between there's a collaborative venture between Maasgauer Docks and TKMS, which stands for ThyssenKrupp Maritime Systems, which is a German firm. And they will be delivered between 2032 and 2040. And the cost is of course humongous. It is more than our entire capital budget for this year. But like I think previous speakers have mentioned, all these costs are spread over several years. Then we have the Ariane class already, which is 2 of them are in commission and 2 under construction, and Aspire class 4 to 6 are planned. Of course, these are very long-term projects. And then we have the SSN project also, very important project, which does not carry ballistic missiles. And we have Project 76, which is again a follow-on sort of SSA class. Then these are the major surface combatants. The ones in blue are the ones which are already being constructed. So we have Project 17 Alpha, which 7 are being built, 4 in MDL, 3 in GRSE, 40,000 crores, and 4 have been delivered and 3 are likely to be delivered shortly. And then we have this Talwar class, which is originally acquired from the Russians, but there has been again a transfer of technology, and the last 2 of these are being constructed by Goa Shipyard. And other 2 are still in the pipeline. Then we have these anti-submarine warfare shallow water craft, which are basically ASW corvettes, which are being built by GRSC and CSL. Other details are shown. Then we have the next generation missile vessels, which are anti-surface corvettes, of which 6 are going to be built, over 1,400 tons. Then we have this thing called a multi-purpose vessel, which can be used for various things. Most of them are some odd jobs, trial vessel, or some target going, or torpedo launching, these sort of things which generally you have to sort of deploy a naval ship, which has got better things to do. So now we are considering having multi-purpose vessel, which can take on all these jobs in one go. And we have two of them which are being built by L&T. And the most important one I would say is the fleet support ships. 5 of them, of about 45,000 tons, which are being constructed by Hindustan Shipyard in Vizag. But 2 have been subcontracted to L&T in Kattupalli, Tamil Nadu. Then we have vessels for local naval defense, next generation OPVs, about almost 10,000 crores, 8 under construction, and then other ones are in the pipeline. Then again, amphibious vessels, very large ship class. This landing platform dock, we have had a number of years which we have lost actually, because projects are getting sort of mooted and then cancelled. But now I believe that the DAC has approved the AON for 4 vessels in October of last year, and they will cost about 80,000 crores. And then the high-speed landing craft, which are planned, but these probably would be air cushion vessels. And then some other vessels which are for special ops and so on. And then we have these other auxiliary vessels, I would call them. The Matangi USV, I have mentioned this Sagar Defense Engineering in Pune. This is a vessel that they have constructed. They initially made a prototype and it carried out a 1500 kilometer unmanned trip. Now the Navy has accepted and they will be delivered to the Navy. Then we have these diving support vessels, Nistar class, we have the cadet training ship which are also coming up. And the National Hospital Ship is a very major project, I would say, which has long been debated and talked about, and finally I believe that the Navy or the government is likely to give approval to this. If you remember, I don't know if any of you remember, during the tsunami of 2004, when there was a mass scale sort of casualties on places in Southeast Asia, the US had sent 2 of these hospital ships, for 40-50,000 tons, with almost some 200 odd beds and so on like that, to attend to the injured and so on. So this is something which we are also now going for, because they can not only support, when you are yourself involved in the war, but they are excellent for also spreading goodwill. Supposing any neighboring island nation has some major sort of natural disaster, you can send these vessels to that country. You can attend to the injured and sick who are there in that country, and that will gain you immense goodwill from that country. So, in conclusion, just like to flash this slide of key takeaways. While the defense budget has kept increasing, it still remains at about 2% of the GDP, and I would argue that it requires to increase to at least 3%. But this of course can be debated during the Q&A. The high percentage of revenue expenditure is still there, especially on defense pensions, and this is not likely to go down anytime soon. Perhaps when the Agniveer scheme reaches its natural conclusion, or the time when the Agniveer start retiring, I think that is the time when we'll come to know. India's expenditure on R&D is still very low. The Indian Navy has always maintained a very favorable capital expenditure to revenue ratio. We have been at the forefront of innovation and digitalization and poised to be completely Atmanirbhar. This is a statement with the CNS by 2047, and all future ship projects will be built indigenously in India. So with that, I have finished my presentation. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Admiral Nadkarni. We have the last speaker now, who will give you a perspective from the defense account side. A word about him. Shri Dheeraj Gugle is the Joint Director at the National Academy of Defense Financial Management. He specializes in defense budgeting, financial planning and resource allocation. He is an officer from the Indian Defense Account Service with a career focus on financial management within the Ministry of Defense. His work involves training Shri Dheeraj Gupta.
Very good afternoon, all the dignitaries present, all the co-panelists, General Narkarni, Rear Admiral Gadkari, Rear Admiral Narkarni, Group Captain Purohit, General Mahajan, and all my dear colleagues also sitting here. We are already short on time and a lot of facts have already been mentioned, so I will try to skip that part and discuss what may be remaining and what was raised till now. So as sir started his speech with the rise that must have been triggered by Op Sindoor, sir, definitely Op Sindoor, and I also feel that there was an element of Trump's treatment to his allies and to the rest of the world in this trigger. The way he treated his own allies, the way he is pressuring anyone and everyone, the only thing that can save us is real hard power, military and economic. Both we have to focus very clearly, we have to have a very clear focus on what we want to achieve. Even the recent agreement with USA, if we see, it's a controversial topic, it may seem very good if you compare to what is happening with other people. But the tone, tenor of presentation from US side is definitely not most respectful. So we must know we have to create our own strength. A lot of past leaders were very conscious that we are not aligned with certain power and made sure that we are capable of holding ourselves independently. Definitely that must have been one trigger for this sudden rise in defense budget, which is a very welcome step. Now coming to the part of percentage of GDP that we keep regularly discussing. Statistics are very interesting. If seen in isolation, they can give very varied messages. Probably a decade back or so, we started excluding one very element of defense budget, that was CAPFs. We used to include it as a part of defense budget before. Then our numbers would seem like 2.5%, 2.7% and all. And as soon as we started excluding it from defense budget and moved it to Ministry of Home Affairs and all, the expenditure remained pretty much the same, kept growing the same way, but the numbers started looking smaller. So we may not want to focus so much on that figure of 1.8, 1.9 to something if we look at the holistic picture. It is very heartening to see that the amount has increased tremendously and the increasing percentage term is like never before. Even around Kargil and all, if you see, this 15% year-on-year increase is huge, and that too moving towards more capital expenditure. Sir also pointed out certain interesting statistics, capital expenditure as a total percent of GDP, capital expenditure as a total percent of defense budget. So we also may have to look at the what increased. In between, for a few years, we had a spike in pay allowances and pension. Now that had started tapering to some extent, and also defense pension का जो tapering है उसका मुद्दा जो आया, I will correct myself कि अग्निपथ का तो अभी तक कोई लेना देना इससे नहीं आया है definitely. It is attributable to very clearly CPI data. जो inflation data है और उससे जो हमारा DA drive होता है, तो that hasn't increased significantly, so that may have been the reason behind tapering. But anyway, whatever the reason, we will have a look at that data also. So in my presentation, I will have a quick glance at certain figures, certain trend analysis, then focus on capital allocations. A lot of it has already been discussed कि कहाँ है, so I will quickly skip that part. Then pension, ex-servicemen welfare, and one of very important element that has happened recently, not directly related to budget, but very much related to where the defense ecosystem is going. There is a new DPM 2025 now. It is not about capital expenditure, it is more about revenue expenditure. But the thought process behind tells you a lot about government क्या सोच रही है और चीजें कहाँ जा रही है. So we'll have a short discussion on that. Then indigenous defense production figures. जैसे एक mention in one of the इसमें आया कि DPSU का allocation जो कम हुआ है. Again, seen in isolation, it may look like कि हम वहाँ कम कर रहे हैं, but somewhere something has increased. कि प्राइवेट इंडस्ट्री के लिए कुछ एलोकेशन आया है, प्राइवेट इंडस्ट्री को एनकरेज करने के लिए कुछ बात आई है, एंड आई थिंक दैट्स अ वेरी वेलकम स्टेप. स्पेशली रिसेंट एयर चीफ के और भी बहुत सारे ऑफिशियल्स के अगर स्पीचेस हम फॉलो करें तो दे वर क्लियरली अपसेट विद क्वाइट अ फ्यू DPSU's परफॉर्मेंस, एंड एनीवन हु हैज स्टडीड इकोनॉमिक्स एंड ऑल अंडरस्टैंड्स व्हाई. सो हम कैपिटल अपने प्राइवेट इंडस्ट्री को टोटली एक्सक्लूड नहीं कर सकते. सो दिस इज अ वेरी वेलकम स्टेप कि कुछ पार्ट क्या प्राइवेट की तरफ भी मूव होगा. देयर विल बी सम कंपटीशन एंड वी मे हैव पॉजिटिव रिजल्ट्स आउट ऑफ दैट. Then we will discuss certain strategic allocations, a few global comparisons, and in the end, challenges and recommendations that might be there. So just a glance, 7.85 lakh crore. I felt very happy to see this figure when it was announced. 15% increase. Then highest ministry is the obvious. जो current standard है उससे 2% of our GDP. Then 2.19 lakh crore is the capital expenditure. RE इसका पिछली बार 186 था. 180 was VE और 186 was RE. So this is a reasonable rise, if not very high one. Then this is a very important thing we have to look at. इसमें ये जो दो figures है, globally अगर देखा जाए तो approx proportion होता है 30 to 35% of defense budget on salary and pensions. Then around 35 to 40% on capital and remaining 25 to 30% on maintenance and revenue. तो अभी भी हमारा सैलरी पेंशन में 46% है और कैपिटल में हम अभी पढ़ रहे 28%. सो कैपिटल में वी माइट वांट टू टारगेट 40% एंड रेवेन्यू एक्सपेंडिचर इज प्रीटी मच फाइन. जो मेंटेनेंस पे और रेवेन्यू पे हम स्पेंड कर रहे हैं. इफ वी लुक एट व्हाट इज हैपनिंग ग्लोबली, इफ यू लुक एट दिस डिफरेंशिएशन इन यूएस, रशिया, चाइना, व्हिच आर द प्राइमरी स्पेंडर्स ऑन डिफेंस. देन टोटल बजट 6.22 to 6.81 last year. Lot of there was expression कि the growth is not high enough, but definitely इस बार की जो growth है, especially we have to be sustainable about it. और second जो मुद्दा सर ने शुरू में ही रेज किया था, I think सर आपने भी रेज किया था कि जो हमारा revenue है, government receipts somewhere around 34 lakh crore है और हमारा spending around 54 lakh crore है. So we are probably spending 50% more than what we are getting. अगर हम borrowing side में रखें. And this borrowings, अगर थोड़ा सा ग्लोबल जियोपॉलिटिक्स और जियो इकोनॉमिक्स अभी जो चल रहा है ये देखा जाए तो ये बोरोइंग इतना आसान था बिकॉज डॉलर में जो क्वांटिटेटिव ईजिंग हो रहा था, हमारे रूपी में भी वी हैड सिग्निफिकेंट लेवरेज. बट व्हाट इज हैपनिंग नाउ, जो गोल्ड प्राइस का राइज, एवरीथिंग इज अबाउट टू चेंज. एंड इफ थिंग्स गो वेयर दे आर लाइकली टू गो, अगर ये जो फिएट करेंसीज हमारे पास है ये अगर डिफिकल्ट हो जाए मैनेज करना, इफ थिंग्स गो टू गोल्ड स्टैंडर्ड और समथिंग, तो जो डेट है हमारा 55% ऑफ जीडीपी, या ये जो हमारा बोरोइंग से हम जो फिनांस कर रहे हैं हमारा खर्चा, विल बिकम एक्सट्रीमली डिफिकल्ट, वेरी वेरी डिफिकल्ट. सो वी विल हैव टू थिंक अबाउट दैट व्हाइल स्पेंडिंग. द गुड पार्ट इज इफ यू कंपेयर टू अदर इकोनॉमीज ऑफ द वर्ल्ड, हमारा फिस्कल डेफिसिट, करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट इज somewhat good order. तो उतना बड़ा कंसर्न नहीं है, but the way things are changing, it might become big concern very very quickly. ईरान में क्या हुआ ये अगर आप लोगों ने फॉलो किया होगा, behind the uprising अगर कुछ था तो it was their currency suddenly falling and वो artificial था. Similar things can be executed anywhere, especially in current environment. So we have to be very conscious about हमारी fiscal position क्या है. And while doing that, if we are able to achieve something like this, 7.85 lakh crore, it is something that we have to applaud. Now, capital outlay वगैरह तो सारा डिस्कस हो ही चुका है. Defense budget, post Operation Sindoor emergency procurement are definitely factored in. उसमें से कई procurement अभी हुई होगी जिसका payment इस financial year में होगा, तो that has definitely been factored in. Regarding the new acquisitions of Rafale M, then 114 Rafale MRFA, उसका immediate liability I don't expect कि इस financial year में ज़्यादा आएगा. In fact 114 वाला हो भी गया तो hardly 5,000 crore इस financial year में आएगा, but definitely अगले financial year पे tremendous उसका impact आएगा. But अगर इसको just पेमेंट की तरह ना देखा जाए और इंडिया के डिफेंस इकोसिस्टम की ग्रोथ की तरह देखा जाए, या ये अपने आप में हमारे इकोनॉमी को एक कंट्रीब्यूशन है ऐसे देखा जाए, तो बिकॉज देयर विल बी एलिमेंट्स ऑफ इंडिजिनस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग देयर and that will be adding to our economy. So we will have to look at it in that manner also. Also subsidies का नंबर भी सर ने जो point out किया, around 2.5% से we are somewhere around 0.8% now. We really can't directly go to zero because social development और लोगों का एक equity वगैरह जो issue है वो भी address करना जरूरी है, but reasonable decrease वहाँ पे है. Now capital expense में ये figures I think discuss किए जा चुके हैं thoroughly, so I'm just skipping it. Anything इसमें अगर कुछ Then aircraft, aero engines, Rafale fighter jets, Sukhoi का technical evaluation official नहीं है, but lot of media reports and reasonable reports से लग रहा है कि something may be going on. MQ-9B drones, AWACS, naval fleet में भी next gen submarine जो सर mention किया P-75I is being given priority, loitering munitions and everything. Vehicles, joint staff ये priority चल रहे हैं अगर major acquisitions की बात की जाए. Pensions 6.56% rise है, which is much lesser than compared to previous year, but as we already discussed, I think this may be due to inflation tapering off and DA rates tapering off. Then ECHS allocation, सर ने सही point out किया कि RE के ऊपर देखा जाए तो hardly 10% का rise है, and medical inflation, education inflation is definitely somewhere around 14-15%, so that is there. Then pension का rise अगर हम देखें तो अब ये somewhere एक plateau की तरह बढ़ रहा है. एंड विद इन लाइक 15-20 years जब अग्निपथ का पूरा इम्पैक्ट आना शुरू होगा तो मे बी तब ये नंबर बिल्कुल भी कंसर्न नहीं बचेगा. देन DRDO बजट में द इंटरेस्टिंग पार्ट इज 148 न्यू R&D प्रोजेक्ट्स गेटिंग सैंक्शनड इन रिसेंट टाइम्स. इंडस्ट्री एकेडमिया के लिए काफ़ी बढ़ रहा है. इंडस्ट्री एकेडमिया के एलोकेशन 4000 करोड़ का है. अब इसमें ऑन ग्राउंड रिपोर्ट्स दैट जो वी आल्सो ट्राई टू इंटरेक्ट मतलब विद रिसर्च ट्रेनिंग इंस्टीट्यूशन, सो वी ट्राई टू इंटरेक्ट विद एनीवन एवरीवन जहाँ जहाँ मौका मिले. तो इसमें कई प्राइवेट इंडस्ट्री का कहना था कि एलोकेशन तो हो जाता है, हम तक नहीं पहुँच गया. बट आई थिंक ये स्लो स्टार्ट है, तो मे बी सूनर और लेटर द इम्पैक्ट विल बी सीन. देन क्यूमुलेटिव R&D स्पेंड भी अगर देखा जाए तो काफ़ी बढ़ रहा है. एंड दिस लीड्स टू, यहाँ सबसे बड़ा फोकस ये है कि इंडिजिनाइजेशन एंड प्राइवेटाइजेशन. जो पहले सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम था कि कुछ भी अगर खरीदना है प्राइवेट से फोर्सेस को तो ऑर्डिनेंस फैक्ट्री का NOC चाहिए था. दैट हैज बीन टोटली डन अवे. देन देयर आर सो मेनी जो व्हाइट लिस्ट की सर बात कर रहे थे उसमें भी क्लियरली है कि ये फॉरेन से नहीं लेना है, आप इंडिया में किसी से भी ले सकते हो. प्राइवेट जाओ, हम प्राइवेट और PSU को साथ में सेम फुटिंग पे कम्पीट करना पड़ता है. पहले PSU के लिए इट वाज टू इजी, नाउ दे हैव टू कम्पीट. If private person is able to deliver better, definitely the thing will be better. Now coming to DPM 2025, the key highlights: ease of doing business, standard procedures सबके लिए, NOC requirement OMP से हट चुका है. Limited tender का 50 लाख तक की सीलिंग बढ़ा दी जा चुकी है क्योंकि a lot of forces need this. GFR में 30 लाख का सीलिंग था, but यहाँ पे इसको 50 लाख किया गया है. और वेंडर रजिस्ट्रेशन प्रोसेस भी काफी सिंप्लीफाइड है. Then industry friendly provisions, LD 0.5 LD का इशू सबसे बड़ा रहता था, 0.5% पर वीक से 0.1% पर वीक किया गया है. Then assured orders की प्रोविजन क्रिएट किए गए हैं, सिक्योरिटी डिपॉजिट कम किया गया है. फास्टर पेमेंट साइकिल, इसमें मजाक में हमारे डिपार्टमेंट में बात कुछ दिन पहले वन ऑफ माय प्रोफेशनल्स रेज्ड, ही रेफर्ड टू सम रिपोर्ट अबाउट यूक्रेन रशिया वॉर एंड पॉइंटेड आउट कि सर जो ड्रोन्स आजकल बन रहे हैं इस वॉर में उनका ऑब्सोलीट होने का साइकिल है 14 दिन का. मतलब जो लिटरली अभी टेक्नोलॉजी डेवलप विद इन 14 days इट्स काइंड ऑफ यूजलेस. बोले इससे ज़्यादा तो हम पेमेंट करने में ले रहे हैं. तो इट वाज अ रिफ्लेक्शन ऑन आवर ओन सिस्टम्स आल्सो. तो मतलब बातें इस लेवल पे चल रही है कि थिंग्स हैव टू मूव, एवरीबॉडी इज अवेयर कि वो कहाँ पे लैग कर रहे हैं, एवरीबॉडी हैज टू इम्प्रूव देयर ओन पार्ट. सो डिजिटाइजेशन पे काफ़ी पुश है. इनोवेशन इंडिजिनाइजेशन पे क्लियरली यहाँ पे एक अलग चैप्टर इंक्लूड किया गया है which has never happened before. DPM में complete एक चैप्टर अभी इंडिजिनाइजेशन पे है और बहुत सारी one of the provision ऐसे भी आ रही है कि industry can come up with a product. This is something that could be useful to you. Now this is very innovative. This is very new. Never happened before. हम SQR से शुरू करते हैं, अपने डिफाइन करते करते इतना टाइम जाता है, अब प्रोडक्ट सामने आ सकता है, देन आप उसका रिवर्स ऑक्शन हो या टेंडर हो, जो भी आगे प्रोसेस फॉलो करो, अब समथिंग कम्स अप विद समथिंग वेरी यूजफुल, could have huge impact in actual war situation. And similar provisions, acquisition policy में भी जो रिफॉर्म आएंगे, it is very easy to guess where it will go. तो वहाँ पे भी इंडिजिनाइजेशन पे फोकस बढ़ेगा, प्राइवेट फ्रेंडली प्रोविजंस क्रिएट किए जाएंगे. नाउ आत्मनिर्भर भारत, इंडिजिनस प्रोडक्शन ग्रोथ, इवन एक्सपोर्ट्स में we were hardly exporting anything just 5 years back. Now we have already started exporting somewhere around a few thousand crores. और 50,000 करोड़ का टारगेट जो 2029 का लग रहा है, इट सीम्स वेरी वेरी अचीवेबल. वी मे वेरी वेल एक्सीड इट बाय दैट टाइम, द वे थिंग्स आर गोइंग नाउ. सो 75% of capital acquisition reserved for Indian industry. That's a big statement from government side. Certain strategic infrastructure allocation, border roads, 7394 crore, ये काफी बड़ा allocation है, मतलब considering the situation of border infra just 10 years back and where we are and where we may be further going. Communication, everyone knows कि with what we saw in Russia-Ukraine war, communication कितना jam किया जा सकता है, क्या क्या हो सकता है, तो dedicated optical fiber network for forces will help in a big way. This is just for global context. ये numbers US 3%, China का misleading number हो सकता है क्योंकि transparency lacking है वहाँ पे. Then Russia 4.8% war economy है. Germany is something you have to watch. अगर पिछले 3 साल में आपने देखा हो तो मतलब it has literally skyrocketed suddenly. And why? ये फोटो सबको याद होगी, ट्रम्प साहब बीच में बैठे और कैसे यूरोपियन लीडर सामने, मतलब एक फ्यूडल लॉर्ड के सामने जैसे उसकी जनता बैठी वैसे बैठा था. So clearly Germany is something to watch out for. They have realized कि क्या गड़बड़ हुआ है and we are still maintaining our poise. India definitely rising steadily. Then UK में भी significant rise है. Saudi Arabia पहले से spend ज़्यादा करता है. फ्रांस में भी थोड़ा rise है. So European countries have noticed. Probably rise force भी हो सकता है कि ट्रम्प ने खुद जो भी पीछे पड़ के किया है. So that is pretty much from my side. Now we can take up regarding स्पर्श का 4 करोड़ का पेमेंट सर. I'm happy that you brought it up. With स्पर्श itself, we are saving hundreds of crores in payments to banks. And ये जो 4 करोड़ remaining है, it is for the service they provide with respect to life certificate वगैरह का जो बैंक में, और वो stop करना may be good, especially considering pensioners are old people. They might have developed comfort with certain institutions. So वो part अभी बचा है, वो that is not 1% of something. और अगर देखा जाए तो साल के 30-40 करोड़ पेमेंट है, उसके लिए 4 करोड़ is 0.1 rupee per payment, which is by any standard negligible.